I even got to the last stage 2 years ago. I got to the last 40 for the Pro License Application Centre, and I walked in the room and I'm up against John Terry.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way.
Welcome to Footwork.
All right, so today we have a very special guest, someone who I was fortunate enough to gain, tons of knowledge under as we had a little venture out in Grythyttan, Sweden, which I'm sure we'll get into. But today, a very accomplished manager at such a young age already, coaching at, various youth academies and scouting across the UK and Scotland. So today we have Deano Sibson on the podcast. Welcome to Footwork, Deano.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. We're really pleased to be here and hope everyone's well.
Yeah, it's great. So, Deano, tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners who may be hearing your name for the first time. Yeah,
so for me, it very much started when I was 16, 17. It might sound very, very young age to take your first coaching qualification, but it was. I'll start by saying my playing background was quite limited due to some unfortunate injuries. And at 21, 22, I made the decision that my coaching career was going in the direction that I wanted it to go on. And I stopped playing competitive 11-a-side football, which was a sad decision to have to make. But it was one that I felt I can't commit to two careers, and I'm never going to make it professionally as a player, given the injuries I was having. And I felt that people always say to me, was it an alternative? And it said, no, it wasn't, because I had a dream and a desire to be a professional football manager. So I started doing the things that you would do, coaching in schools, coaching in community groups, trying to get your face known. And fortunately, I got taken on by Port Vale Football Club and the Community Trust. I started to work in the academy and spent numerous good years there before moving on to Wigan Athletic. And that was one of the first moments where a bit of a wow moment for me, having to watch Roberto Martinez and, having the flexibility to watch some of his sessions and to go there. And I was charged with coaching the under 13s, 14s at the time. So for me to have that ownership of that group at youth development age was terrific. And spent 3 fantastic years at Wigan. Unfortunately, living in Stoke-on-Trent at the time, which was probably, 50 miles to, there and back, so a 100-mile round trip. It did get a little bit much, 3 or 4 times a week. And Stoke City were interested in taking me, so I sidestep moved to a club 5 miles away from where I live. And 2 good years at Stoke. Unfortunately, changing management there. We wanted to change the whole academy at the time. And didn't really fit with my philosophy. So I ended up moving to Wolves and had another 2-3 excellent years at Wolverhampton Wanderers. And at the start of their little meteoric rise really to the Premier League, because, before people look at Wolves now and see them as maybe a top 10, top 12 Premier League club, but Wolves haven't always been there. They've always yo-yoed, in recent history from Championship to Premier League. And I was just at the start of that process when, sort of Nuno, Espirito Santos was coming in, and the change in the philosophy of the academy was brilliant at the time. And how we developing players, a lot of 1v1, a lot of ball manipulation, a lot of ownership on individually beating your opponent. And then for me to sort of fast forward on a little bit, I had the first chance to go into professional football management in Iceland, and I weighed it up and I thought, is this going to be something which is beneficial to my career going abroad? It's not beneficial to every coach. Sometimes they come back and it's hard to get back in. But for me, there was no second thought, to go and challenge myself, new culture, new climate. And I went across to Iceland and, through a lot of hard work over 18 months, managed to win a League Cup and finished 3rd in the Premier League with the women's side. And that got me the move to Sweden and obviously subsequently Finland, and I'm sure we'll touch on that as we go along. So yeah,
absolutely. So I do want to test you on the pronunciation, your Icelandic pronunciation. So can you pronounce that team for us? IBV Vestin.
EBVOF. Simplify EBVOF. The IEBVOF. EBVOF.
EBVOF.
Amazing.
Fire.
So yeah. So I mean, you've like you said, I mean, at 16, getting your first coaching badge. Just can you go into that? Just explain, you have at such a young age, you have all these friends around you that are really looking, in these academies looking to play, and was it something that you kind of had nicks of before you got the injuries, or was it like once you got the injuries, it was like, okay, now it's time to start thinking about what I can do professionally?
Yeah, definitely, 100%, and that's why I go back to the question that I said I've been asked several times, because I started so young. You know, was it people say, was it an alternative? Just because you couldn't play, you went to no, not at all. And there's a lot of coaches who will say yes to that because they're hell bent on being players. I knew my limitations as a player. You know, I was and unfortunately, the injuries came from being a bit of a tough tackling central midfield player. You know, very competitive, and I was never the quickest. I was never the most skillful, but I knew my limitations. And I knew my fitness.
You were a clean-up six. Yeah, huh? Just clean it up.
I knew fitness-wise I could get box to box, and I knew that I could pass, and I knew that I could tackle. If you asked me to do anything else, I'm probably not going to compete as much as some others in the forward areas. But I took that badge that early because I felt like this is going to be the start of something really, really promising. Fortunately, in England, you can take your first coach. I think it's now 17. You know, I felt a bit out of place on the first course. I went there and I was in a room full of, you know, people 30, 40 years old. And I thought, oh, you know, is this the right thing to be doing here? But at the same, I threw myself into the course, and the FA Level 1 coaching qualification, you know, has been changed since, but it was a welcome introduction to life as a coach. And I wasn't one of these coaches who, and I was told not to do this, and I didn't. I wasn't the sort of coach who would get the qualification, go and get the next one, and say, right, okay, I'm a professional coach now. You know, I spent time, like I say, you know, working in socially deprived areas within Stoke-on-Trent, you know, dropping a ball in and helping a group of disadvantaged youngsters, you know, using football as a tool to, you know, get them into smarter avenues, that, you know, going standing on playgrounds, freezing cold than first thing in the morning, teaching PE. So, you know, it has had a huge amount of varieties. I think when I went to Port Vale and got into a proper football club, it was a pleasure to work with some pros, and I saw how hard the pros were working day in, day out, and that just inspired me to say, this is the level I want to be at. And, you know, being at Wigan under Martinez, and Stoke, you know, under Mark Hughes, and Wolves, Paul Lambert, going into sort of the Nuno days, you know, you do get to watch those sessions, you do get access to those sessions, and that's just made me more of a creative and more of an innovative coach myself. And that's why I liked, as you probably saw in Sweden, you saw the attention to detail that I put in for every single session, because I work on the methodology that you should make your next session the best ever. You know, I never allow myself to drift. You know, if I've done a 5 out of 6 out of 10 coaching session, I'm not happy for the rest of the day. You know, and you know, and you know, as a coach, when you've done a session, that was okay today, that was all right, but it didn't tick that box, and you try and make sure each session has a social, technical, tactical, and physiological advantage as well. So
sure. Now, you know, you got your first badge at 16, and you mentioned a very important point, that you weren't one of those coaches that would just, you know, get your level 1, then your level 2, level 3 without ever applying it. At what point, because you were so young, were you, you know, training a team when they were maybe only a few years younger than you? You know, was there, at what point did you have a team, you know?
Yeah, really good question. And I think at 16, I was just hell bent on getting the experience. So like I say, you know, it was probably working with youngers. I think under 10s, under 11s, to a local grassroots club. I started to get involved with my local non-league club, and just working with the first team manager, reserve team manager, again, 17, 18, just watching sessions, going out, working in the community. So again, you know, you're working with people who's a little bit younger than yourself, going on a match day, watching the warm-ups, just really help, you know, actually getting a pen and paper on a match day at Port Vale, writing the warm-ups down. And that might sound really strange, but it was because I was thirsty for knowledge, and the training ground was accessible to those of the staff. So we would often sneak out of the community building and go around at 10:30 in the morning and watch the session. And, you know, I happened to be pulled round by our community manager to say, we're going to do some work today, you know, and it was, but that's how thirsty I was to improve my own knowledge, and to, it's the time away from that. You know, you're going away, and, you know, yes, these days it's easy to probably put on a Netflix or something like that. But for me, it was watching football, and I just couldn't watch enough football. You know, and as I got older, you know, I'd actually, you know, spend money, or until I got a scouting job where I'd go and, you know, just watch as many games in a week as I could, whether it be paying, videos, whether it be going live games, and you just got to saturate yourself with as much football, but also the right sort of football with the right contacts. And that was something which is over the years has improved for me, is my contacts in the game. And, I'm very fortunate now. I can pick the phone up and ring a Football League manager. I was talking to one this morning, actually, and just talking about the result from the weekend. 15 years ago, I couldn't do that. Nowadays I can. And that's just the dedication to the game I think you have to have, to get to the levels that you want to be at.
Sure.
So do you think that you could get Sean and I a nice trial in the championship at some point? Just pick up that phone. What are we saying?
I'm still looking for my next club myself, Dylan. So we'll see.
Perfect.
It's hard, yeah. Just on that one, I mean, you've seen some of the American talent which has come over to the UK shores, and it's never. What I would say is it's never ever a closed door from my angle. There's more and more opportunities. Yes, there's been salary caps, and yes, of course, with the whole Brexit situation here. But without wanting to go too much into that, there's still a lot of opportunities for US players to if they've got the talent and the ability to showcase that, and who knows, get picked up by a professional club.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you mentioned something very good there, very important, I think, as young professionals, young coaches, is just that ability to soak in information and just be a sponge in your career. I think especially as a young coach, you lack the quote unquote experience in terms of years.
Yeah.
So what you lack in terms of this, I think, like you said, is just so important to really be a student of the game. So, just talking to other coaches, especially young coaches, how important would you say it is to be that sponge that's just constantly looking to gain new information, new perspective?
Yeah, definitely. And at the end of the level 1 course, I remember them saying to us, our advice is you go away. I think at the time it was for a minimum 6 months before you enroll on a level 2. Well, I think I did 12, and I did 12 because I just thought, well, okay, the level 2, I'm told it's a bit more detailed. It's obviously naturally an upgrade in terms of technical information. So I spent that time, and you can be a bit naive sometimes at 17, 18, thinking, well, not that you know it all, but yeah, I'm ready for this now. And, I just took a bit of extra time to keep working in grassroots. Yes, I was coaching, I was doing little soccer schools here for, working for my grassroots club, my local club. And I felt that I was ready at that age. And it wasn't until 21, 22 till I did my UEFA B license, which still at that age to start the UEFA B license, it's quite early as a coach. 26, 27 before I completed the UEFA A license. And still now, I'm actively seeking to get onto the UEFA Pro license at 34. And, I've had conversations with the FA, and it's very, very competitive to get onto the UEFA Pro license. There's only 18 spaces per year. Wow. There's only one course run a year. So I even got to the last stage 2 years ago. I got to the last 40 for the Pro License Application Centre, and I walked in the room and I'm up against John Terry. You're looking around the room thinking I'm the only non-playing ex-professional in the room, and unfortunately I didn't make the last 18 for that particular course. But the experience gained and just having the ability to speak to people like John Terry and others was a huge experience. So yeah, I would say you can't saturate yourself with enough football. You've got to be fanatical about it if you want to get to that. And that's the same for a player. You guys will know as players as well. If you don't do the right things and you don't make yourself fanatical about your playing career, you're only going to get to a certain level. And I'm a firm believer in the adage: if you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you've always got. And that's one of the sayings which I say to myself most days. How can you push yourself on a little bit more each day?
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I mean, I'm very interested in England, especially, just being the prestigious footballing country and coaching country that it is. Does it put you at that big of a disadvantage not having a playing career, whether it's a John Terry level or, a League One, League Two, even in these levels? Does it put you at a significant disadvantage in terms of gaining employment or gaining that A license, pro license?
And again, it's a really good question. And I'm under no illusions, and I'll be totally honest. I know my lack of a professional playing background could be ultimately what stops me getting some of the higher jobs. I was listening to our local national radio station this morning were doing a feature on Brighton and Hove Albion, and they had the manager there, Graham Potter, was speaking, and he was talking about the change in philosophy from when he went in from the previous manager, and how he's had to spend time trying to embed a philosophy. Well, that's okay, but you've also got to keep the club in the Premier League. And those are the two challenges that he has to face. It's all right going in with a philosophy and a methodology and the idea that they play really attractive football, which they do, but you've also got the pressure of having to keep them in in arguably one of the richest leagues in the world. So for me, it's no different. I look at it and say, I've got a philosophy and I've got a methodology, but I can't imprint that until I get the right position. And I've got to keep working hard. I've got to keep speaking to the right people. I've got to keep making sure that I'm putting myself in the public eye, but I'm also updating myself with trends in football. As we know now, you've got to be aware that the rule changes. How much is VAR having an impact on the on the game? So you've got it. You can't. I can't be stuck in the 2000s thinking what I did before is good enough. And the game evolves, and you either evolve with it or you get left behind. So I think for me, yes, the lack of a playing background is key. But the reason why I went abroad in the first place was to sort of do a Graham Potter example, really, and say, okay, I'm not going to get in this way. I'm going to go abroad. I'm going to become a better coach by working with players from all around the world. Yourself included, Dylan, and many others. And I'm going to do it this way. When 2 trophies later and 3 countries later, I'd like to think I'm in a good position now to. Well, I am, because I spoke to chairman, I spoke to club owners, and some of them say you're not far away. Some of them you have conversations with, and hopefully things will happen in the future. But unfortunately, we're all governed by the current pandemic, and hopefully things change soon.
Right now, kind of tying into the point before, how you were heavy on, you instead of waiting 6 months, you did 12 months to do your B badge.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that it's tough to learn by books is dealing with different personalities, dealing with people as a coach, right? And just because you have a lot of knowledge of the game doesn't mean you can portray it to the players and then they connect and understand what you were saying. Now, you went away to a foreign country, which now makes it even more difficult because there might be a language barrier, a culture barrier. Yeah. How have you developed, of course, from such a young age with this, and what were some big barriers going abroad with connecting with your players, your philosophy, just language in general? Getting them to understand what you want.
Yeah, the biggest challenge facing me when I first went to Iceland was that do-don't situation. Am I going to be in a stronger position by the time I come back to achieve my overall dream and my goal? My overall dream and goal is to work professionally in the Football League. And the reason why I've said Football League and not Premier League is because I think there's a chasm of difference at the minute between the two. The Premier League would be fantastic, but I think the Football League the English Football League is an achievable goal. That's not saying the Premier League isn't, but I think you set a goal like that and you're working every day towards it. So that was the biggest challenge. And going through my head was, am I going to be further away? How is coaching abroad perceived in English football? And by some clubs it's perceived as a positive, other clubs it's perceived as a negative. They don't entertain it. They'll go for what they know. They'll go for the merry-go-round of managers who have got the 150 games under the belt, 200 games under the belt, and that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. And you get results with those type of managers. But I looked at the bigger picture and thought, well, yes, it might be Iceland, but why can't I carve out a career in maybe European football or football around the world? And then maybe later in life, because I'm still a younger coach, maybe come back with the credentials and maybe the experience to then work with Football League players. And that's what I've done. And I had some international players that I worked with in Iceland, and that was my first time of working with Icelandic internationals, albeit in the women's game, which was fantastic over there, by the way they perceived that, and everything was built towards women's football over there. I had some really, really, perfectionist type players who you'd have to physically drag them off the pitch, at the end of the session to get them in, and players who potentially were at risk of being injured, who just wanted to stay out there practicing free kicks, hitting top corners and hitting penalties. And ultimately, by winning the League Cup final on a penalty, it was justified, all that practice and that time on the grass. So that was the first one. And, to go to Sweden from there, the decision there was, okay, well, am I ready? am I ready for, the Football League and everything's going to... No, I'm not ready. And I felt for me that going to Sweden in the men's game, working with players that I was told were coming from all around the world, not just the States, there were players there from other countries. And I'm sure, Dylan will back me up on this one when I say one of the biggest challenges there was amalgamating that group into a squad, because there were some fantastically technical individuals, Dylan being one of them. But at the same time, there was a lot of different personalities. There were some who wanted to, do things on their own. There were some who were very sociable, who wanted to be around players. There were some who were more shy. There were some more outgoing, some introverts, some extroverts, and bringing all that together into a squad that was capable of winning that league was a great achievement, fantastic achievement, and one that we should all be very proud of. And at the end of that, to then go on to a bigger club in Finland, I felt was the right time. And my career was progressing bit by bit. And unfortunately in Finland, I never got the chance to fully show what I could do because of the financial situation at the club. But I look at it and say it was the right thing to do by going abroad. I'd do it again now. I've had the opportunity. You learn so much about yourself, your independence. And I felt like I became a better leader of men abroad, because I did that job relatively on my own with no backroom staff. And for me, I saw them players grow together day by day, every training session. They grew socially, they grew as a squad, and that was reflected in the results. So I would be very much an advocate of any young coach wanting to go abroad and learn their trade.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just to come back to the Sweden experience that we shared, I mean, just to touch on some of the countries that were present. I mean, we had US, we had Mexico, we had Canada, we had Brazil, we had, Sweden, we had refugees that were in Sweden. So, I mean, and I think a big point and a big challenge for you was, like you said, I think we had some very technical players. I think at times there was a little drop off in terms of talent or experience from players that were, on the bench fulfilling, as roles.
Yeah.
And for you, how difficult was that to design sessions, to bring a group together that kind of differed in terms of levels, and then ultimately, I mean, languages for sure?
Well, languages, and apologies for not answering that question, the previous question, but languages, I was told when I got the job that they wanted me to speak in English. They wanted me to coach in English. They wanted me to speak English. And learning Swedish wasn't obligatory. It wasn't something which I had to do. So that was one of the, not say conditions, but that was one of the expectations upon taking that job. And that is quite common across Scandinavia. I was told the same in Finland and in Iceland, that they didn't want to weaken or dampen the quality of my sessions by me trying to talk in another language. So they wanted the sessions to be conducted in my native English. However, and I'm sure you'll sort of familiarise yourself with this though, Dylan, is that when we got amongst the whole squad there in front, there was some Brazilian players that couldn't speak a word of English. So, and to their credit, they had fantastic perseverance, that they were still trying to seek the right answers, and they were still trying to work off demonstrations, and some of the other players were helping them out. But I did try and learn a little bit of Portuguese at the time, and not overly successfully at first. But
That's a tough one.
Enough to communicate with in certain aspects.
Mm-hmm.
In Finland, I started to just skim the top of it really by learning a little bit of Finnish, because I felt in football, to the level it was at, it was something I had to give back really. It was a second tier of Finnish football, and a club who've just been recently relegated from the Finnish Premier League. So this was arguably the biggest club that I'd managed, and I didn't want to be naive and go into this and just, speak English. So I was in the process of learning a little bit of Finnish, but again, I wasn't there long enough to complete that task. But no, personality-wise as well, you've also got the issue. Like I go back to the point that I made about the extroverts and the introverts, and you'll have seen it yourself. You know the players that are going to be out there 10 minutes before the start of the session, rondoing or warming up proper, and you know the ones that are going to turn up a minute before the start of the session. And what I tried to do in Sweden was bring everybody together to a group of a culture of excellence, really. I set those expectations and those core values. And one of the things I've learned as a coach is you never go away from them. You never lose your core values. You might change things like formation, you might change shape, style of play, but your core values that you have personally as a coach are embedded towards you. And I found it hard initially to get some of the local players over there to get it to buy into them, because they'd done things a certain way and they were used to doing things a certain way. But I don't think you win leagues if you don't have everybody singing off the same hymn sheet. And that is ultimately why I think we achieved the success, because everybody bought into what we were trying to do.
Right. Now, can you go into a little more about what happened in Finland? Because like you said, this was your biggest team.
Yeah.
Up to that point, what happened there?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the club had entered into a period of financial difficulty in amongst the time that the deal was being thrashed out and me going over there. And I actually signed a 3-year contract in Finland. And my briefing was to, in the first season, to get the club back up to the Premier League, the Veikkausliiga, as it's called over there. The second season on the contract, as we agreed, was to stabilise. And then the club were that ambitious that the third year they wanted to push for Europa League / Champions League. And the budget reflected that at the time. And they just, unfortunately, were never able to recover from the relegation, the financial costs of that. And ultimately, some of the better players that we had at the time, they sought opportunities elsewhere. A lot of hard work behind the scenes to try and recover and to try and repair, but they weren't able to fulfil the fixtures. And unfortunately, the club, 4 months into my 3-year contract, was wound up, went bankrupt, and was declared no longer active as a professional football club. To their credit, they have since reformed. They've since reformed and started again right down at the bottom of the Finnish ladder, a la teams in England, such as AFC Wimbledon have done it, coming back, and Newport County, obviously leaving the Football League many years ago, have come back, still the same club, but they've had to start again. And there's many clubs that have had to do that, and this club, to their credit, have done very well, and they've 2 promotions under the belt, and they're now back in the 3rd tier of Finnish football. So I do wish them luck. Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow. I mean, as a 3-year, signing a 3-year deal too, I'm sure that was quite tough, because it's not only your biggest opportunity to date at the time, it's an opportunity to really instill a philosophy that is truly yours, and, work with professional players in a professional environment that's much more structured maybe. But I mean, how do you bounce back from something like that is, such a roadblock in your coaching career at such a young age?
Yeah, well, I very quickly realised that there was a lot of young players who obviously were still there after the relegation. So you go down the road of thinking, well, at the minute, there's not much positivity going on around the club. There's not much optimism because of the situation. So I made the sessions as creative, as innovative, and I don't dare I use the word fun, but as fun as it could possibly be. But at the same time, whilst preparing for the season ahead, not knowing if the season was actually going to go ahead. And I suppose that's very similar to how some clubs were doing at the start of the whole process, the whole COVID-19 situation over here, not knowing when football was going to restart. And having spoken to a few professional coaches over here, that was obviously a struggle here, is preparing and training, not knowing when the actual games are going to take place. So it was a struggle. How did I personally adapt? Well, I knew that training was going to be on every day. It was, despite the hugely difficult temperatures, and I think at -30 was the lowest I'd experienced. But we were training indoors every day, in the dome. And I remember we played one game, and I was told that the legal limit where a game can be called off in Finland is at -15. And I remember I was on the sideline and looking up at the thermometer, and it was -14. And we'd actually just got a goal down, and I was thinking, yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on. Pick another one. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I look back at that I'm quite a positive person, as you can probably tell, and I look back at that with lots of great memories, experience. Yes, the situation wasn't good at all in terms of how it finished, but I learned so much again about adaptability. I had to adapt. Every single day you went in there, and you'd have to put a really brave face on a training, because you'd have to inject that positivity and inject that enthusiasm, which is natural to me anyway. But then you'd be going in front of the media in the afternoon, and you'd have to answer questions about the future of the club. And obviously I wasn't privy to all the details. And you go from wearing one hat to another. And the ups and downs and the roller coaster situation ultimately meant that, it wasn't going to be as long term as I would have liked. But since then, I've looked upon that as the positives of that. I was offered that position, and hopefully I'll get offered similar positions in the future. And I'm here and I'm ready to go again. I've dusted myself down and taken some time to reflect on what I did right, what I did maybe wrong, and I'm ready to go again. I'm full of energy and ready for the next club, the next challenge.
So to transition now away from coaching, correct me if I'm wrong, are you currently a scout for Mansfield Town?
Up until recently, I'm not anymore. So in terms of obviously legally, I can't claim to be because I'm no longer I am. I can touch on experiences within scouting at Ross County, Doncaster and Mansfield, but I can't say I'm there. No, because COVID, Mansfield took away the whole scouting block. They had to financially close it now. And there's no scouts.
So let's dive into that. Scouting, I mean, from my understanding, it's a lot different than coaching because you're not dealing directly with personalities. You're more looking from the outside. And I know of a scout. He was scouting for Arsenal at the time, and he said it at times can be frustrating because you spend all this time looking at players, but it doesn't mean that the team in the end is going to take what you're giving them or your feedback. I mean, in your eyes, where have you scouted in previous years, and how have you felt about that?
Yeah, so my first scouting mission came, I was coaching at the time, but as I said, I was going out and watching games, and I was paying to get into games at League One, League Two. This was probably early to mid 20s for me. Academy football as a coach, but a contact of mine was at Ross County in Scotland and asked me if I could go and watch one particular player, just as a favour, because that player was playing on my local patch near me. And I did, and I wrote a report, and he was really impressed by the report. He said it was fantastic, and detail was far beyond what he envisaged. And that became a regular thing. I ended up watching a lot of League One, League Two football. And you're watching for two things, because obviously what you're not watching is you're not watching the next opponent, because obviously Ross County are Scottish and I'm watching the English Football League. So you're watching two things. You're watching players for the now and players for the future. Players for the now is always a bit difficult because you're governed by transfer windows. So that became more prevalent, August, September at the start of the season when, the window's about to close, more so for loan players. And of course, then January when it reopens again, back end of December into early January. So for me, it was more so watching players for the future and looking at young players coming through. Is this player maybe ready for a loan move? Is this player potentially someone who could physically handle the rigours of maybe Scottish football? Because it's difficult up there. It's good. It's good level. It can be physically difficult for young players to go up there and compete. So that's how it first came about. And when I got back came back from I think it was Iceland. I was scouting for Doncaster, and a contact of mine who was at Doncaster at the time, who's actually now the manager at Hull City, Grant, said to me, "Listen, Dean, you come watch a few games and just see what you think in terms of these players, potential recruits." And obviously that then became a little bit more oppositional analysis. So once I was trusted to provide detailed reports on players, I was then asked to go and watch opponents. And that goes back to what I was saying. You could be at Colchester on a Tuesday night, having to make a journey a 3-4 hour journey back at the end of a 10 o'clock game, and not getting back till the early hours, having to write a scout report up for the next day, and that's, the travel was tough, but at the same time, you're in a very privileged position as a scout, and you look at that and say, well, I'm doing this for the benefit of the club, and you're hoping that obviously your club then go on to win the next game. And then finally, most recent scouting position was at Mansfield, as I mentioned before. Unfortunately, with COVID-19 affecting the finances of clubs, that's affected the scouting department at Mansfield in terms of its limitations, its resources. So I was only there a short period of time, but again, just watching opponents, watching potential players, and looking at who can make a difference in the future.
Right. Now, can you dive deeper into the process of what does a scout do? So what did you do as a scout if you're going to look at a player?
Well, first of all,
take us through the process.
Yeah. So first of all, you would make sure you do your homework on the player. So you do your research, and I'd always be an advocate of watching a player 3 times. if the player was of an interest to a club, your first initial viewing is to look at the profile of the player. Does it match what you know from your research? Has the player changed? Has he played in a different position? You might have a position in mind that you think this player plays, but you could go watch somebody who you thought was a deep lying central midfield player who might be playing more as a 10, and that's happened in the past before. You could go to watch a centre back who's playing at fullback. So you've got to first of all look beyond what you initially thought and say, okay, so what are the parameters of this player? Has he got a primary position, a secondary position, and maybe even a tertiary position that potentially you could say to the manager, yeah, this player is flexible, this player is versatile. I think the second viewing of the player would be to cement what you already know. So on the second viewing, I would say, okay, well, I scored this player this from the first time. Maybe it's a score out of 10, maybe it's a score out of 5, whether that be for technically, tactically, physically, impact on the game. And a lot of scouts in this country have this thing where on 70, 75 minutes, it's an unofficial rules of scout, where they go. And you see a look across in the scouting section, and a lot of scouts will leave on 70, 75, 80 minutes when the player's been taken off. But I would always look at the impact after the player's either gone off, and do the team miss that player, and what's been left behind. So I'm always a scout who I would stay 90 minutes to the end of the game, even if I was 3-4 hours away from home and got a long drive back. So I think the second viewing is to cement what you already know. Has anything changed in the player's performance? And I think the third viewing is to make a decision. And because you've got to back your decision. If you're half and half, 50-50, or you're a bit unsure about it, then the club aren't really going to take you seriously. And I would never have said to the manager, "Oh, well, I think you should sign this." You've got to be crystal clear. You've got to be sure in your own mind this player is going to A, improve his team, and B, is going to be someone who, yes, got the ability, but have they also got the personality? Have they got the is this someone who's going to want to come? And right. So that's how I would describe the process for me, really. That will be different for each scout, though, that in each club. So not every club will be governed by that particular way of doing it.
Now, in this structure, as a scout, how are you judged on by your employers and by the clubs? Is it based off of players that you recommend that may turn out to be good fits? Or because you may recommend players, but the club is not always going to take your word. So how are you evaluated as a good scout in this process?
I think again, each club. I'll start by saying each club's different on this one, because their success will be judged by, for some clubs, by A, the number of players you get in, B, by the quality of player that you get in, C, how frequently you get players in. My best spell as a scout, so to speak, in terms of players that I would back myself in terms of recommending and getting in was probably at Doncaster. And I remember watching a player 4 times just to be absolutely sure. And I won't name the player, but the player was playing for Portsmouth at the time. And Portsmouth from here is a long way away from me. But again, sometimes you'd watch him away from home. Sometimes you'd watch him at home. And you've got to do that, I think, because the player might be fantastic at home, but away from home might struggle. I'd also look at the teams that are playing. So for me, for example, if I was watching a player in League One now, I wouldn't want to make a judgment having watched them playing against Sunderland, Portsmouth, Hull, for example. That would be a poor use of time, because I'm looking at the player playing against 3 of the top sides in the league. I'd probably be looking at maybe a game against Hull, maybe a game against Bristol Rovers, and then maybe a game against MK Dons, for example, and split them across the 3, so that I'm watching against a mid-table opposition, against a team at the bottom, and then a team at the top, because the psychology changes, the tactics change. The team might be playing one way against Hull and completely another way against MK Dons. So I think all these variables come into play. And of course, I will have watched the player on video before I even go out, and I'll probably watch the player on video again before the absolute recommendation goes in. I'll probably watch another one just to be absolutely sure. So it's a very difficult question to answer. It changes club by club. Right. But success can be measured in many, many ways. For me personally, it was, did I do what the manager asked of me? Well, I think I did at the time, because I was able to get the right player through the door in terms of what he wanted, within the right budget, the right position, right, with the right attitude.
Yeah, so there's many factors involved. Very, very interesting. So to transition a little bit back into, I guess, all of the things, all of these positions that you filled, you mentioned that you have and have built such a interesting, consistent network. Now, I've, just from talking with you back in Sweden and then, doing some more research just to refresh myself on all things Deano. I read that you worked under Sol Campbell for a bit. So can you go into some of the big names that you've been pleasured to work with, work under, and learn from?
Yeah, in terms of names, well, Sol Campbell, just to touch very first on Sol. Sol was somebody who I learned an incredible amount off in a very short space of time. I was at Mansfield for 8 to 10 weeks. I'd already signed a pre-contract agreement in Finland. So technically I couldn't get paid. I couldn't have a paid position by another club. I'd already signed a contract. And Mansfield to where I live is roughly around about a 20-minute drive away. So as a personal friend of the chairman's at the time, he said to me, listen, Dean, I've got a manager coming in who is a high-profile manager. I didn't know that at the time who it was going to be. But he said he's not got a huge amount of coaching experience. I know that you're leaving us shortly, but if you're available a couple of days a week just to come and help out. A couple of days a week turned into every day because obviously I was available and I was thirsty to learn off Sol. And this is a player who's represented England, played numerous Premier League amounts of Premier League football. So for me, being around this guy was I could only improve. And we had a situation where Sol was just infectious with his coaching. He would leave no stone unturned. He was incredibly detailed. Sessions would sometimes go on for 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, we were due to play at Colchester away on the Saturday, and obviously that includes an overnight stay. Colchester is quite a 4 or 5 hour journey from here, and obviously the team coach was ready to go down in the afternoon. We'd arranged to have lunch before we were going, and the session would start 10:30, 11 o'clock. Well, 1:30 we were still training. Well, the bus was meant to be leaving at 1 o'clock. So and that's a compliment to the guy. That's a compliment to the guy because he wants his players to interact so much. He wants to get as much information into his players. I got on the plane to Finland thinking that was probably the best 8 to 10 weeks I could have spent prior to, because I learned so much. In terms of others, I spent 3 years at Port Vale. Now Mickey Adams may be a name that doesn't resound to many, but Mickey's gone on to manage Leicester and Fulham. Premier League manager of 800 odd league games, phenomenal manager in his time in terms of what he did with clubs in terms of getting them to the Premier League, the way he transformed at the time, like I say, Fulham into being a perennial Division 1 club and getting them into the higher realms. Leicester as well, and he was somebody who had a different management style, but who I very much respected, because at the time he was more of a disciplinarian would be the wrong word, but he could have the technical and tactical side, but he also had the firm, authoritative side, and you just knew where you were with Mickey straight away. He left no stone unturned in terms of knowing what he thought, and he's the sort of person he could build you up and and improve you as a player, but also he would take time out to from the way I understood, to work with players and let them know exactly what they were doing wrong on the pitch, so you weren't unclear as to he's leaving me out for whatever reason. So Mickey would be another one, and I'm quite fortunate to know a few. I mean, I would have mentioned Grant McCann, who's the manager at Hull City. Grant was my manager at Doncaster Rovers, and Grant would often say to me, listen, Dean, come watch training. You're more than welcome to come and watch training. And as a first team scout there, I would take the opportunity and I would drive to Doncaster and go and watch the training sessions, and they would be absolutely fantastic, because again, you're looking at a manager who's a player who's played for West Ham and for Peterborough, who's now going into the early part of his managerial reign, and somebody whose sessions I look back and thought, whoa, do you know what I mean? Everything was really high tempo. Everything was competitive. The players were at it every single time I watched. There was nobody going through the motions, and it's no coincidence that he's now back at working in football at a big club like Hull. So I mean, there's just 2 or 3. I am quite fortunate I can pick the phone up to a few Championship managers, just to have not worked within the game, but that I've met on my travels, and you exchange contact numbers when you're, at half time or you're at the end of the game, and and I really respect the fact that they'll take time out of their busy schedules to help me.
Yeah,
amazing,
perfect.
So, I know you're short on time. Do we have a little bit of time left?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. So I guess you've had quite a career so far, and you're still early in your career. But what has been one of the most difficult challenges you have faced or continue to face with coaching?
Have faced is not the being abroad; it's the coming back from abroad. Because again, it's the perception of Finland was a bit different from the rest, because I felt that I never got a fair chance in Finland to really get going. When you sign for 3 years, you can't look at it from a contractual situation and say I'm going to be there for 3 years, because as we know in football, anything can happen.
Right.
These days sometimes it only looks like you got 3 defeats and you're under pressure. But I never felt that I really got a chance to put my methodology or philosophy across there before the situation became apparent as to how deep the troubles were. So that was a difficult one to overcome, and that's why I've taken time out of the game to reflect. And obviously, unfortunately, at the time during my reflection process, I had the opportunity to go back to Sweden, and that was a tough decision to make, because I knew that a relegation battle was commencing there. And you're looking at it's always the what if. Well, what if I come back and clubs still don't look at it as a positive? I see it as a positive. It's just that perception. Here in England, it can be a good thing with some clubs, or it can be a negative thing. And like, as I said previously, some clubs will go for what they know and they won't change from that. Some clubs will embrace a manager who's been abroad, like Brighton, for example. Brighton could have gone for after Chris Hughton left Brighton and Hove Albion, they could have gone for a tried and trusted Premier League manager just to keep them in the Premier League. What did they do? They had the foresight to go for Graham Potter. Graham had spent his career in Sweden developing as a coach, Östersund. What did they do? They went to Arsenal, winning the Europa League, made his name for himself.
Yeah.
And now he's a firmly fixed Premier League manager, having just signed a 6-year contract. So, those sort of things are what motivates me. People like Graham and all that. Hearing those stories make me think that I can achieve and get as high as I can in the game. But there have been disappointments, and of course there have been highs, there have been lows. But like I said at the very start of this podcast, I think I'm the sort of person that takes the lows and turns them into a positive. And my advice for any coach would be, if you're going to get dumbfounded by the lows, and you're going to, you've got to look past them a little bit. You've got to have that desire to go again, sort of thing. And that's why I'm still looking now, and still talking to clubs, and potentially, hopefully, once COVID-19, is one day be back in professional football and ready to go again.
Yeah. Now, before we get into our little ending fun game, where we're going to ask you, some questions where the viewers can really get to know you. Just to quickly point out about what you've said about Graham Potter and his meteoric rise through Sweden. I know, talking with a lot of the guys that we had in our Grytitan camp with you, we felt, and this is not to badmouth the club, because the club, was great to us, and it is what it is. I think they were hindered by resources and stuff, is what I would say, in terms of capital, in terms of just, infrastructure. And we had spoken a few times, and we really thought that with our core group, developing players, getting Swedish players throughout each year, and with you at the helm, we really felt that we could have made that same, maybe not that same meteoric rise to go into the Europa League and beat an Arsenal. Yeah. But we truly felt that we could have really brought this into the third tier and maybe, second tier with that core and with you, and just having that group who knew right away how to win. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. I fully sort of echo what you said there, Dylan, to be fair. And the biggest regret from Sweden is that we're no longer working together and have that challenge ahead of us after winning the league. It would have been nice to have seen where we, what were the limitations? Where would we have gone?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if that had stopped at Division 3, Division 2, then of course, then that's down to us as players and coaches. But that's the biggest regret in Sweden would be we never really got the opportunity to find that out.
Yeah,
but,
to just see where we could have win. You know, it was a thing that.
No, it is also very pleasing to hear that, you know, like yourself and others that the team I speak to are continuing to play around the world, you know, and I keep in touch with yourself and I keep in touch with as many players as possibly can. And it's nice to hear that, you know, just because the opportunity wasn't there for us to carry on in Sweden, that, you know, players have still got the tenacity and still got the desire to go further afield to other countries, yourself in Germany and one or two in other countries. So that's really, really great to hear, and long may that continue. And if we work together in the future, then that's I
would love it. I love the sessions, and I've echoed in this podcast before that I felt that you were the manager I've learned the most from, just in terms of, I mean, we could come to you with tactical questions and it'd be like, just rattled off, like, all right, if we're in a 3-5-2, you know, what does this player do here? And I just feel like the knowledge of the game comes very easily, and you're very well suited to portray that and project that to your players. So, I mean, kudos to you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Of course. Now it's time for the fun part. So we're going to get into the little game. Hopefully you have an answer for each of these, but you know, we'll just, I think I think our viewers know you quite well at this point, but now they're really going to get to know you. So of course we start off with the number one question in football always is Messi versus Ronaldo. Who are we picking?
I'm picking Messi, personally. Do you need a reason for that?
I mean, if you want to give us a quick reason, I think
it's a huge debate, and it's one that there's not, for me, that the two are on a level far and above any player that's in the modern era that's even remotely tried to come close to them. They're on a different pedestal altogether. Others have tried, but you have to say for the sheer numbers alone, those two are on a completely different universe. Why would I put Messi ahead of Ronaldo? Purely just for that instinctive ability to just do something out of nothing. And you might say Ronaldo can do that as well. And I remember Ronaldo's debut against Bolton in the Premier League all them years ago. I was actually watching that live at the time, and you know, he come on as a substitute, and the Bolton defenders didn't know what hit them. This is what, an 18, 19-year-old kid who was. Yeah. You know, it was a bit of the ability in front of 72,000 to just mesmerise defenders and leave them in the wake. Fantastic career, and I just think, for me, having seen Messi live at Anfield, you know, virtually destroy Liverpool as well, in single-handedly, and the ability to turn a game out of nothing that was drifting, and the ability to do that by his creative brilliance. He sees passes that other players don't see, and you know, he sees gaps that other players don't see. He has the ability off his left foot, right foot to drive forward. He has that ability to score from virtually anywhere in the final third, and I just think he's been a phenomenal. They both have, but the personal preference, I would just say Messi shades it slightly.
That's fair.
I love it. I think we're all in agreement there. So you were at Anfield, you just mentioned. I heard you are quite the Liverpool fan.
Yeah.
Now, what is the best stadium in England besides Anfield?
The best stadium that I've personally been to, or the best stadium?
Yeah, the best stadium
you've. Sure.
Yeah, your favorite, personal favorite. Could be either.
Well, I've been to the new Wembley, but I was only I was watching Stockport County versus Rochdale in the playoff final. So in terms of atmosphere, obviously that was many years ago. But the new Wembley, from an aesthetics, would have been probably the best in terms of the view and everything that comes with it. Now, I've not been to the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but I know people who have, and they tell me that that's just another level altogether. But I've not personally been, so I can't say. But for atmosphere, I have to say, and it's not being biased, but there is none better than Anfield, in my opinion. You know, and I was there, and I've been fortunate enough to be there on nights such as the Borussia Dortmund night. You know, the fourth, the Barcelona night, the return. You know, I was there. I was there for those games. So
you were there for the Origi game for the winner.
Yes, I was. Yeah, but unfortunately, I should have had a ticket in the Kop for that, but I gave it away to somebody who hadn't been for years, and I settled for a main stand ticket, and I didn't quite get the same feeling, but yeah, it was.
That's crazy.
I just don't think it's any better. You know, there's Anfield on a European night is an experience you have to savor. You have to savor. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so I don't know how much you've traveled as a Liverpool fan, could be in general, but what about the best foreign stadium you've been to?
Unfortunately, I have to say none, because I haven't travelled as a. I'm going to go to the Nou Camp, but that wasn't Liverpool connected. So to answer your question about travel as a Liverpool, I always have an issue with that because you can't as a coach do both. Like for me, a lot of my work's been done abroad, and watching Liverpool comes down to contacts when I'm back. It's just people that I know who've got the opportunity to get to get a ticket, or to it's not like I'm available every week to be a Liverpool supporter who goes every single game. So to watch Liverpool abroad, there's just very little opportunity for me to do that. In terms of actually the stadiums, I would 100% say the Nou Camp. I went there just for a weekend. I caught a game against Granada, I think it was. Yeah, and again, I think Messi scored 3 or 4 that day, and he was just
of course.
So yeah, fantastic stadium. I mean, the thing about the Nou Camp, or the Camp Nou, however it's pronounced, is it's the shape of the stadium. It's if you go there as an away team, it's a daunting presence. It must be. It's so vast. It just dwarfs you.
The away fans are
definitely,
right in the corner. Like there's barely any away presence there.
But people tell me that the Bernabeu is the same, and I've never been. So, but it's one of them, and maybe that's one that one day I get a chance to go. But,
on the list for sure.
All right, so then let's go right into a little lightning round. These are just quick bang questions.
Yeah,
Pizza or pasta?
Pasta.
Icelandic or Swedish language?
Oh, Swedish. Without doubt. Icelandic was too tough. Yeah.
Rock or rap music?
Rock.
A goal or an assist?
It's got to be a goal, hasn't it? It's got to be a goal. It's got to be a goal. Yeah.
Volley or diving header?
Volley, for sure. Yeah.
Winning a league title or a cup title?
Oh, that's difficult. Yeah, that's not as easy as that would seem. League title, but having won the league and with you in Sweden and the cup in Iceland, both moments were very, very significant. I'll go league. Yeah, I'll go league.
4-3-3 or 3-4-3?
Oh, now we're talking modern day stuff, aren't we? Personally, 4-3-3 at the minute. I say at the minute because it seems like everyone's playing 3-4-3. You look at the Premier League, especially these days. The back four for me gives stability, and until you can play around with other systems. So 4-3-3. Yeah.
All right. Manchester United or Everton win the Premier League?
Everton.
Oh wow! Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. All right.
There's this perception that Liverpool fans dislike Everton some more than Man. I can tell you now, the biggest rivalry is Liverpool-Manchester United, without a doubt. Yeah,
Okay.
I might not be talking from an Everton perspective there, because obviously they'll say Liverpool, but from a Liverpool perspective, it's Manchester United.
It's a bit different, yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're not on your level. This one's very important. Eddie Howe or Sean Dyche?
Well, one's in work and one's not. Is the question who's done a better job, or is it who you prefer, or
who you prefer?
I'm going to say Eddie Howe, purely for the way that he tried to play some really brave football with Bournemouth. Now, he did get relegated, and the one thing you have to say with Sean Dyche is he's kept Burnley in the Premier League for all these years. He's done an incredible job.
Unreal.
Yeah. And I have had the pleasure of meeting Sean once, and he's a nice guy, a really nice guy. I just think with Burnley, they have to, at some point, what's the bigger picture for Burnley now? They've stayed in the Premier League. Can they get that top half, push towards mid-table? It's going to be difficult, but with new investment coming in at Burnley, the takeover. Interesting times. I would say watch this space with Burnley, but in terms of just from a football purist, I'd say Eddie Howe. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think they got a little unlucky with the relegation. They had a lot of injuries that year. There's a lot of things that went wrong, and I'm a huge fan of Eddie Howe. I've said it on the podcast a million times, but what he did at Bournemouth was incredible.
And hopefully he gets back into management soon. I mean, they just signed Jack Wilshere. I think that's a really good. If Jack can keep himself fit, then fantastic signing for the Championship to try and get him up. So, no, I hope Bournemouth can get back amongst it. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that timer says it all. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Deano. I think we covered so much. It was a quick hour, and hopefully soon enough we can have you back on here. Maybe a post-COVID once you've secured that next position, which I'm more than sure you will.
No, I just want to say thank you to you both for having me on, and thank you to all your viewers and all your listeners too for taking an interest, especially in some of the episodes in my journey. It's been an incredible one so far, but it's far from over. And like I say, really appreciative of everything that we did in Sweden, Dylan, and hopefully we can work together again in the future. And if not, good luck with your travels in Germany, and stay safe and stay well, everybody.
Appreciate it. All the best, Deano. Until next
Take
time.
care.
Thanks, Deano.
Thank you. See you. Ciao, guys. Bye.
Wow, Sean, crazy episode there. Bro. I mean, it just I feel like we could talk to him for days. Just getting someone as obsessed with the Premier League as us, and we could have dove into VAR. We could have dove into a lot of things.
It could have been a 12-hour.
It could have
marathon podcast.
Yeah, but he was a guy that I tried to just soak up information, like I said, when we had the pleasure of working together in Sweden. And, it's a similar path, I feel like, to us in a way where being a coach at such a young age, 16, he gets his first coaching license, trying for his pro license up against the likes of John Terry. He's on paper, he's an underdog, as I think, kind of we are when we are Americans journeying abroad to follow this dream. So, I think there's a lot of parallels we can draw. I hope the coaches, follow him along and take what he has to say, because he's someone who's living it right now. And, he's right there. He's got all these contacts, talks on these network. I mean, a lot of the things like you see, it's very similar in terms of building.
It is. I mean, and he's made his own path in a way with going abroad. Like he said, it's like a fine line between, is this going to help his career or not? Mm-hmm. But you certainly are going to learn from putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And, what stood out to me the most, I mean, you have talked him up quite a while now, ever since you've been in Sweden. And it's nice to finally hear him and his personal story. But like the dedication from a young age is the reason where he is where he has gone up until now. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, whatever your dream is, your passion, you have to immerse yourself in this. Like all he could do, like he said, it was think about, go watch football, and then think about it. And then if he had a bad session coaching, we've talked about how it's not always good to you can't stop thinking about it. But at the same time, that's the level of dedication that you need to have in order to reach the apex of coaching or whatever it is you're chasing. And I think that's one of the most incredible parts about his story is that, I mean, up until this point, he has had a lot of things, a lot of adversity that didn't go the way as planned, but here he is still. I'm sure he's going to have a great job coming his way soon, and I'm sure he's going to be very successful.
Couldn't agree more.
No doubt.
I mean, it's that level of obsession that's needed to really master craft and, get to areas where people don't think are possible. All these professional athletes, they didn't get there. Tom Brady didn't win, 7 Super Bowls or whatever it is just from, doing what he's doing every day. Like he said in the beginning, I can't remember what the quote was, but it was like, if you keep doing what you're doing, then you're going to get what you've got. Something like that. And it's just that like, if you're just going to stay stagnant doing the same thing every day, the same level. Okay, I'm putting in work, but I'm putting in the same amount of work every day. Now, how can you get better? Right. It's that level of obsession.
Always ways to improve and adaptation.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Crazy good episode. Great to hear from him again. That's it for us, though.
It is. Keep plugging and passing. You know the deal. Like, subscribe on YouTube. We have we have some big things coming.
Big things coming.
Actually, by the time this episode is out, you'll have heard about it. But until next time,
keep moving forward.
Keep learning.
And make your own path.
Footwork is sponsored by ourselves. Also, Kong Fitness and Merchant Designs, baby. Follow us on Instagram at Footwork_podcast. Twitter is at Footwork Podcast. YouTube and Facebook, just check out Footwork Podcast, search it. Email us if you need anything, any questions at footworkpodcast@gmail.com. And remember, plug, pass. Tell your parents, Amazon delivery guy, mailman, I don't know who, just tell them. Like, subscribe, review, all of it helps. Danke.